I was knocked down, heard the countdown through the haze, in the face of defeat, yeah. I was ruled out with no bailout, on my own, all alone, left to bleed out. But I rose up from the ground, just like I was spellbound, all the odds were against me.
Hannah, welcome to the Pocket Mastermind Podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good. Very much for giving up your time to come and speak to us today. We're really interested to speak to you because of you've got a background in education, psychology, but also personal experience with mental health and well-being, and with a lot of people, being in lockdown for quite some time now, and uncertainty around going back to work, and all of these other contributing factors. I think there'd be great benefit in other people hearing from people that have been through various experiences with mental health and well-being, and the steps you've managed to take and to move on past that point of view. So yeah, we're really interested to talk to you about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about mental health all day. I know we're not going to talk all day, so I'll try and keep it. But yeah, thanks for having me, and really happy to be here.
Tell us a bit about your experience. Do you remember when it really started, or was it kind of a slow transition into this experience?
That's quite a difficult question, because I think it's something that sometimes you might have a massive life event, and then after that you can kind of see that that's clearly when it started. But I probably, now looking back from my teens at least, had some stuff from life events to work through, but it wasn't until I finished university and I went to some mental health awareness training for a new job that I had, and I honestly nearly cried when I talked about depression, because I was like, oh my god, that's me. that's me. And I hadn't recognized it, and I'd obviously had low mood and difficulties kind of doing things I'd enjoyed, and obviously the markers of depression, but I didn't know that's what it was until someone had just gone through, these are the things. I was like, oh, that's what it is.
Do you remember what those kind of things were? How many down the list was it before you kind of thought, hang on a second, this rings a bell?
Well, probably from the beginning I was like, oh yeah, that's me. But things like the not enjoying things that you previously had, the low mood, the feelings of kind of not mattering or not being missed or being a burden to people, which can be quite common. And then there's a lot around, I guess, around energy, that either being really fast and really like frenetic energy, or being really slow, and sleeping a lot, and those changes to sleep and to appetite and those kind of things. And if I look back at university, I definitely had times where I struggled to get to lectures, which is probably quite common, but I would just not be able to. Yeah, I mean, how much does the normal student experience?
Didn't get to lectures, yeah.
Yeah, but I was quite.
It's easy where you could miss that kind of thing, though, right? Because it's, like you say, it's quite common.
You can, yeah, and I mean, I'm quite a geek, really, so I quite like learning. But I'd struggled to get out of bed and just watch like a box set on repeat, and I just didn't have the energy to do it, and kind of withdrawing from things that I'd enjoyed. But I think the kind of big thing was that I guess the emotional or lack of emotion there, because for me, my depression experience, and it will vary for everyone, but it was a real sense of being kind of numb, of not really feeling anything, just kind of feeling empty, and kind of so yes, it's low mood, and some people might have a really kind of powerful negative emotion, possibly, or sadness, but I didn't have that. It was just kind of empty and just numb, and yeah, so it's just, I was just kind of going through the motions a little bit, and I so that was when I really recognized it. And fortunately,
do you remember how long you had that feeling for?
A long time. I think I think for a long time through college, I was bullied at school, which had quite a big impact on my self-esteem, and it's only now looking back that I realized how much of an impact it had. And my parents went through quite a difficult divorce, which was very unsettling. But then I just kind of got on with, just kind of tried to get on with life. And I always have had, because I've had a few episodes now of depression, it's always been high functioning depression. And so that's, I still worked, although probably I do remember one period of time after I'd come out of an episode that my colleague said I was just like a robot, and I thought I was doing fine. I was like putting this effort into showing up and putting on that brave face or whatever, and then sleeping a lot when I got home. It really takes a lot of energy to show up and to put a mask on. So I thought I was performing well, but apparently I was just like a robot.
It's interesting how other people pick up on it, isn't it? Even when you think you're doing a good job of hiding, it's a hard thing to hide when you're lacking that energy, the inner energy that comes with it.
And I think that is really key, that inner energy, because there's lots of things that you just don't have the energy to do. So the example I quite like to use is laundry. I'm quite proud. Look, I've got laundry behind me, which shows that I've done it, because actually when I'm quite depressed, it's not that I don't like laundry. I mean, it's not my favorite thing, but when I'm depressed, it's just so much effort. Like even trying to get your head around this thing that you have to do, and with depression, it could be even just having a shower. It's just, you just can't comprehend, like, how do you do that? It's just so much energy, and you just can't do it. And so it is really about that energy, and that extends to the things that you love, the things that you enjoy, the people in your life that actually you maybe don't enjoy their company in the way you normally would, because they're not really feeling anything. It sounds really bleak, doesn't it?
No, but it's true. I mean, Steve and I both had various spells of similar kind of experiences as to what you described from my own personal experience. And I found that you procrastinate, like you were just saying, that you end up procrastinating on all of the little things that you need to do, and then that ends up just building up, and it becomes something that niggles in the back of your mind, because you've got a load of jobs that you really should have done that you haven't done. Like you spend the whole weekend. For me, it was just get to the weekend, and I'd spend the whole weekend doing nothing, and then because I'd done nothing, come Sunday night, I knew I had a whole new week to wait until I could do something again. But I didn't do anything again the following weekend, and that went on for I don't know. I think for me, it kind of like, it was a gradual. I don't even remember it starting or ending in any way. Really, I kind of remember the end more than I do the beginning. It could have been 10 years. I honestly don't know how long.
Yeah, and I think I can definitely see that I had several periods of depression where it was much more extreme. And I say extreme for me, not extreme as it would be for other people. But it was only a couple of years ago, looking back on all of that, and very cliched, as I was about to turn 30, and I was like, what have I done with my life? And I realized that I had thought that I was depressed or I was fine. And when I look back, I was like, I wasn't really okay at all. So I had obviously these more extreme periods of depression, but the rest of the time I still wasn't really living, because I still had I hated myself. And it's kind of what I discovered. And I think that had a big part with the depression, because I just kind of didn't feel it was worth anything. So I kind of wouldn't go for the things I wanted to do. And then there's that kind of sense of not really living your life. And I think that all kind of feeds into it. But there was something really interesting that I noticed about a similar time when I started to actually try and do things that are supposed to be good for depression. I kind of decided I'm not okay with not being okay, so I need to do something about it. And I noticed something interesting, and I had never really thought I had anxiety, but actually when the depression started to lift, I felt anxiety, because when I was depressed it was just flat. And once that went a little bit, I had ups and downs, and then I got a lot of social anxiety and anxiety about stuff. And I realized fear had been a big factor in my life, but I just hadn't really seen it because it had been hidden. So that was quite an interesting part
That
of.
is interesting that an emotion that's quite as strong as fear gets hidden by, I guess, the numbness and the other thing that's more at the
Mm.
forefront. And do you think the two were linked? Do you think there was an potentially anxiety earlier on that's kind of progressed into the depression?
Yeah, and I think for me, I guess a lot of the depression, I think, is about that not liking myself and holding myself back and all of that. And I think a lot of that came from this anxiety and this fear of being judged and what other people think. And so I'm a big people pleaser, or was trying not to be so much anymore. But I definitely think they were linked in that a lot of the things where I was holding myself back was because of this anxiety, but I just didn't really see that at the time. So I think it's so interesting to be able to look back and then kind of go, oh, maybe that's why I did or didn't do that thing, you know. But
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, what do you think it would allowed you to be able to, start to see it from that perspective? Because I think half the time, when it's very until you're able to see it from almost a kind of a third party perspective, it's hard to take any steps to do anything about it. What do you was it that training course that was the first moment you kind of you managed to get that perspective?
so I think that was when I really recognized the depression.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a course of CBT at the time, so cognitive behavioral therapy, and that helped to a certain extent, but I still had a few periods of depression after. And I've taken antidepressants a couple of times, but I think it was at this point a couple of years ago when I realized that actually even when I wasn't depressed, I still wasn't really okay, and that I needed to work on myself. And I think depression can be kind of cyclical, that you get these waves of depression and then it lessens. And so I guess I came to this realization in a slightly better place within the waves to be able to do something about it. And so I did a bit of research, Googled things that are good for depression, the classic list, and exercise is at the top. And I was like, oh, so boring. Everyone says exercise. But I decided I'd just do it like an experiment. I'd just try it and see, because like, what's the worst that would happen? So I tried it. Shocker, it helped.
They were all right.
Yeah. Oh God, they're obviously onto something. So exercise, trying to and comfort eating was a big thing that I did when I had low mood, which not necessarily the best, because if you're just eating rubbish, you're not giving your body what it needs. So, and that's still a work in progress. So I'm not not sat here as like
I think we're all a work in progress on that one.
Yeah.
I have to keep stuff out of the house, otherwise I'm a vacuum for it.
Yeah. Things like sleep. But I just kind of tried out all of these things. But I think the biggest thing was I started to try and work on my mindset and on my relationship with myself, because for me, that was like a big thing at the root of it, that I wasn't happy or anywhere close to happy because I had such a negative view of myself, and I just wasn't okay with myself. And so actually, to make lasting changes like the exercise, even that I had to kind of flip how I felt about it. So it wasn't, and I think for exercise, for a lot of people, it's maybe punishment, like, oh, I need to lose weight, or I need to do this, I have to go to the gym. And so I tried to see it as, actually, I'm worth putting some effort in for myself, even if I had to tell myself that at the beginning and didn't necessarily believe it. But when I tried to do it from a place of nurturing myself, it was easier to kind of commit to. And I had to do a lot, I'm still doing a lot of work on accepting myself and loving myself. And this isn't something that I've said on my podcast or publicly before, but actually a big thing was K-pop, which
really
sounds really silly, but I started listening to this K-pop band called BTS, who you might have heard of. And they have this album all about loving yourself. And I kind of was listening to that and then actually kind of absorbed the message that I needed to love myself. And actually it was quite a big catalyst to kind of go, oh, I actually do need to love myself. And so K-pop.
It's funny where you can find the messages when
Yeah.
when suddenly you reach a point where you're open to receive some kind of message. You can find it in the most unlikely of places, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was obviously just the right time to hear it. And I think there's a lot of people who will say about loving yourself, and I think that's a lovely idea. It's a big jump from I hate myself to I love myself. So I just worked on trying to just be okay with myself and just accept who I was. And I really thought about the people in my life who I really cared about. And I had one friend who was great because she was kind of a bit like Marmite. She was a very, very kind of eccentric character who I could see like some people were not a fan of her, but she was just unapologetically herself. And actually the people that loved her really loved her. And it was like, well, she's just being herself, and it's okay, and she doesn't care that some people don't like her. And I was like, I kind of want to be like that. Actually, if I show up as myself, some people might not like it, but actually some people might really like it. And so
have you ever figured out what a trigger is for your depression? Have you ever, now you've had many spells, do you think there's one thing that keeps cropping up as to what starts it each time?
It's a great question, and I haven't really thought about it. And I guess it's because over the last couple of years, I've been in a better place. I haven't so much, but I think I have a bit of a track record of probably not doing what I really want to because of all this fear and anxiety. And I think sometimes it's that response to staying in a situation, whether it's career or relationship or something, that I don't really want to be in, but I'm kind of in denial with myself because actually making that change feels too difficult. Or so I'm just in a situation that I've got that kind of internal battle of I don't really want to be here, but I'm not going to admit that to myself. So I'm going to stay in it.
So when it does kick off, do you now have a default way of dealing with it? Can you now say, we're started again. It's because I'm doing something I don't particularly want to be doing. Do you then stop doing that to make yourself better, or do you keep trying to find a way of having the best of both worlds all the time?
I think it depends what it is. I think some things are easier to leave or change than others. So like career-wise, I've got much better. And as David said, I worked in education and I loved working with young people and helping them. A lot of what I did, so it's in special education, was helping them figure out who they were and their place in the world and all of that. And I loved that, but the politics of being in a school and all of that just wasn't good for my mental health. And before Christmas, I did a term teaching. I went back into education, just part-time, because I was like, that would be better for my mental health. And actually, the culture of the school and the way it felt, I could just tell like this isn't the right place for me to be. And I normally have real issues leaving a job that's not right because I have this weird sense of like guilt or obligation, or what will they do if I leave? They can't possibly cope, it's a weird mix of you feel really insecure, but it sounds like you're being really big-headed at the same time. And it really is from, I think, this insecurity of actually saying to someone, well, I don't want to work here anymore, in a nice way, and their reaction and whether you can handle that. But I could just tell that this isn't the right place to be. And I was really proud of myself that I actually made the decision to leave. So I did a term, which was like the shortest amount of time you can do in a school, and then left. Again, I love the students. It was just that wasn't the right environment. And so now I'm better at listening to myself and checking in with myself. And I can recognize flags, like warning flags, that actually my mood's taking a dip. So I need to look at what it is. And actually, we talked about food. Junk food is a big one. So when I notice I'm having more junk food, and I think it's that when I'm feeling really drained, I don't have the energy. So I'm craving that high fat, high sugar food because I need that energy. So when I can recognize, actually, I've probably gone to McDonald's too many times this week. Or, there's chocolate wrappers all over my car. This is a sign that I need to look at something. And I think that is a really important thing to do for yourself, to, if you can, identify your triggers, which can be hard to do, or your flags that something needs looking at.
Can you turn it around quicker now?
I think so. Yeah, because I think before I would just have gone into a depression, and that could last a couple of months of withdrawing, and I'm not very good at reaching out for help, and it's the thing that I always say to do. It's so hard to do, because I didn't really tell people about it, and so now I think it would be easier because I've kind of flipped and done a 180, and now I tell everyone about it. So actually it'd probably be easier because I could be like, oh, you know how I talk about depression? Well, actually, I'm feeling. Whereas when you don't talk about it at all, then it feels so hard to reach out. And I found, I don't know whether when you had periods of this you found the same, particularly family. I found it so hard to talk to family about it.
I think I'd agree with that, only because especially my mum, our mum, is the most positive person in the whole world, and so no matter how big your problem, it's all going to be all right. And so you get frustrated with it. I used to get really frustrated with it on the phone to my mum. I'd be like, you just don't understand, because everything's not going to be all right. You can't tell me everything's going to be all right, because that's not how I feel. And so I did find it much easier to speak to other people. And ultimately, the reason that I speak openly about mental health is so other people do. It's not really actually to help myself, especially if I'm feeling all right. I'll talk about it anyway. And it's only because I want other people to know that it's all right to talk about it. And at least somewhat, like, I'm going to listen to you if you're my pal, and we can like discuss it or whatever, however you're feeling. But it really frustrates me that it's so taboo, really, to talk about. And I don't know if it really is any more taboo about. I often think, well, maybe everyone else is all right. They can't be.
I think it's, people are talking about it more, which is great. But I think with your mum saying, oh, it'll be all right, it's a natural thing to do, isn't it? Because you want the person to feel better. But actually the message you're kind of getting is it's kind of diminishing how you're feeling a little bit. Yeah. Because it's like you're feeling absolutely terrible or rubbish or whatever. They're like, oh, it'll be fine. And you really just feel not understood or not seen. Yeah. And that's something that's so important to humans, to kind of be seen. And I always say that the most powerful thing, like if you don't know what to say, you can just say, like, I don't know what to say, but you can just listen and be there for that person and not try and fix them or interrupt or offer all these solutions, because that's not helpful and it can actually have a negative impact. But just saying, do you know what? I don't know what you're going through, but I am here for you. Yeah. That is so powerful.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's hard, isn't it? Because as humans, we're fixers. We do try and fix, and it's hard when someone has that has a challenge, and you do want to solve the problem. But I think what you just said there is really important, and try not to solve immediately, because just the listening part. Most people end up solving their own challenges with the opportunity to be heard. You know, they kind of talk themselves through the process anyway, given enough opportunity to do so. So sometimes it's just being heard, I think.
And just by listening, and I think that's something I'm at the moment going through that process of training to be a counsellor, and a lot of that is about being able to just listen and hold space, because in normal life we interrupt, we kind of think, oh, that's like the time I did whatever, or you offer solutions, because that's kind of how social conversation works. And actually, when someone's talking about something like this, that's not really the kind of response they want. They want that space. And it's something, and I often do this now. If I'm trying to think through something, I'll audio record myself in the car, because then I can kind of talk through it. And then actually sometimes I find I've come to a solution just by having that space to think through it. And so what I would say to kind of people, if there isn't anyone in their life that they think that they, one, feel comfortable speaking to or can speak to, who will just listen, places like the Samaritans, which doesn't have to just be mental health, it could just be feeling lonely and want to chat, it's really helpful. Or therapy if you're going through a difficult time, because they're trained to be able to support you in that way, and to kind of hold those powerful feelings for you. Because I think for me with family, I had this real sense of not wanting to upset my parents or burden them, or all this kind of guilt and shame around it. And actually, if you're seeing someone who it's kind of their job to deal with your baggage, it's still difficult to open up to someone, but there's not that same kind of guilt or I'm going to upset them that there is with family and friends, I think.
Yeah, I think that's, your question a little while earlier around, what our experience is, and what you just said there. I think so many people you're always asking people how they are, or they ask you how you are, and how often does anyone actually give an honest answer to that question? How are you? And most people, oh yeah, I'm fine, and then often that's not really the case, and it's a very difficult one to, because it's not often, it's in passing, isn't it? You're doing well actually, and then unload. Suddenly the person got an awful lot more than they bargained for when they asked how you were. So it's really, really difficult. And I think trying to find maybe someone like you suggest there, someone independent, is a very good first step. And you may find that from that point, then you're able to open up a bit more to people that having kind of got over that first step.
Yeah, I think there are also other ways that you can help yourself to kind of think through things and express things. And I quite often will journal, so I just write, and it's similar to the talking out loud, just to kind of let stuff out, have a rant. And I have got some friends who might be like, I just need to have a rant, and they're like, okay, and then they won't do anything, they'll just let you rant at them for a bit. And that's, if you don't have a friend you can rant to, I would suggest finding someone, because it's quite powerful just to be able to, I don't need anything, I just need you to listen while I just moan about stuff or let stuff out. But also art can be a really good way of expressing and processing emotions and just letting them out, because I think we can find it really difficult to go through those powerful emotions, so like anger or sadness or grief, and so we just try and bury them down, which is not the best way of dealing with them, because eventually they're just gonna explode, or they're gonna come up. And actually art can be a really good way of just channeling them, or and it doesn't have to be something you show people or for any reason, just to let them out. And actually I say this, and I've been talking about creativity for a little while on my podcast, and I've never had the time to do it. Yesterday I spent some time sat in the garden painting.
Oh, nice.
And it was so lovely, and it was just nice to be in the moment and let stuff out. And it feels like it's quite a bright, colourful painting, so I guess it reflects that I'm in a better headspace at the moment. So
it's nice, and it's something they use for kind of returning soldiers and that kind of thing now with PTSD, is art to help process a lot of the deep ingrained kind of emotions and memories and that kind of thing. So there's a lot to be said for art, and it's kind of a mindfulness type activity, really, because you are in the moment. You're doing that. You're not thinking about something that's niggling away that happened before. You're not worrying about something that might happen in the future. You're just distracting yourself. And I think, sports can be good for that kind of thing. Any type of activity that requires you to be present, I've certainly found to be quite beneficial.
Yeah, well, when I tried exercise, I discovered CrossFit. And there's something when you're lifting a very heavy weight above your head, you kind of got to be in the moment. No, you've got to be in the moment. Or like a handstand against the wall. Like if you're not in the moment. But I think the mindfulness thing is so true, because I think a lot of the things that bring us down are when we're either living in the past or the future in our head, and we're worried about something that might or might not happen, or our interpretation of something that did happen or didn't happen, because actually everything that's in our head is just our own interpretation of it, our own story, which might just be stuff we've kind of made up. And it's like with CBT, the classic example is that you see someone and they don't say hi back to you, and so automatically you're like, oh, they're angry with me, I've upset them, no one likes me. That's just a story you've made up, and actually probably more likely is they're busy, there's something going on with them, whatever. It's our own stories that are the things that bring us down. And so actually when you can just be in the moment and just responding in the moment, I think you're not telling yourself stories so much, you're just kind of responding. And I feel much happier when I'm in the moment. And any of those practices, like you said, the sport, the arts, meditation, if that works for you, and it doesn't have to just be sitting meditation, it could be walking or sport as a form of just kind of being in flow. It helps you be in the moment, and it does take time. It's not a kind of quick fix, but I think that definitely helps. And I've noticed that I am much more living in the present now, and I think that helps, because for me, a lot of my social interactions, I was so anxious about what people thought, and my head was just kind of going. Now I just try and just be in flow, so that's kind of quiet because I'm just responding, and people will think of me what they think of me. There's a great quote I heard from Rachel Hollis, who's a podcaster and speaker in the US, and it's that other people's opinion of you is none of your business.
I like that. That's very good. Yeah,
because it's their own story, it's shaped by their own experiences or how they're feeling on the day or whatever, and it's nothing to do with you, really.
So true. I think so many people get caught up trying to make people like them and influence how people feel about them, and you could do everything under the sun, and it's not going to guarantee how somebody else thinks or feels. One thing you can't do is control how anybody else thinks or feels, because to your point, there are a million contributing factors on any given single moment in time. So they may be happy it could have been 10 minutes later or earlier, and it could have been a completely different reaction to meeting you than it was at that particular single moment in time. So I think freeing yourself from trying to influence how other people think and feel is a great first step. It's definitely something I've kind of taken on board.
I think it's a lot easier when you've reached a point of feeling better about yourself, because I think if you don't feel good about yourself, you kind of need that external validation from people. But if you can get to a point where you're like, I'm all right with who I am, I'm an okay person, maybe you love yourself and that's great, but maybe just like, I'm all right, then actually I think you're better able to tolerate people having a negative perception, because you're like, oh well, I know I'm all right. So and again, it's not in any kind of big-headed way, it's just having enough self-acceptance and kind of self-confidence to be like, I'm not going to let your opinion affect me. And
no, I think that's good. And one of the other things I took from the Steve Peters the chimp paradox, and we spoke about this previously, was detaching a lot of the our anxiety or frustration comes out of we paint a picture of how an event should be, or how something should be, and the fact the world should be fair and all of these things. And the world isn't fair because, well, depending on your definition at any given time, again, you know, it's a subjective thing, but the world technically, you know, really isn't fair. How you have decided a particular event or scenario should play out, the rest of the universe hasn't signed up to it. So there's no guarantee that's going to happen. And I think we get ourselves attached to this is what's going to happen, or this is what should happen, and this is how things should be. And you can quickly tie yourself up in knots because the chances of it all coming out the way you've hoped it would, or planned it would, or really determined that it should have done it, are quite slim.
I really love along with that where he says about not having expectations in situations, and that's when I read that, that's something that I've been doing, of trying to let go of that. And it came up on the counseling course that I'm doing, actually. I think we were talking about expectations of a certain part of the course, and I was like, actually, I don't have any thoughts about how it's going to go. I'm just in the moment, see what happens. Because I'm a lot happier when I don't bring too much of that into a situation, and I can just go with the flow a little bit. And that's taken time to get to that point, but absolutely, if you can just try and go with it, let go of those expectations.
It does take a bit of practice, for sure. And
it does.
The good news is there's lots of opportunity I found every single day to practice it, because there's always some kind of scenario that will lead to something else, and then you think, well, what's going to be the outcome of that? A great example was this weekend, you know, leading up to 7 o'clock yesterday, the amount of speculation over what was going to be said. You might as well just wait to see what's going to be said. Otherwise you'd tie yourself up in knots for 2 weeks trying to figure out what the various permutations are likely to be, and you've still got a much higher chance of not working it out anyway, and you still have to wait to find out for sure. So you might as well free up your own mental space in the meantime and wait. And if it's a scenario where it's out of your control, I would suggest try and park it and think about and go back to doing something that's in the moment, so that you're not dwelling, because it's futile to not think of something. By definition, you're going to be thinking of it. So you kind of, I remember who it was that someone said, when you worry about something, like describe a tree, because you know you can't be describing a tree and not thinking about, you know, and try not to think about something else at the same time.
I think there's something, you know, life is uncertain. Like, always it's uncertain, but we like to try and feel like we're in control. And I think with everything that's happening at the moment, it's suddenly just made it really obvious to people life's uncertain, and we're not a fan of that. So we want to know what's going to happen. But actually, if you can just be in the flow, it's kind of like just riding a wave, that you're just kind of responding to what happens. So you're not kind of clinging to certainty or control in the same way. So I think when you can be more present, you can deal with uncertainty more, because you're just responding to everything that comes up. And I think it is that kind of being too much in the expectations and how things should be, that then the uncertainty just kind of throws us. So we want the answers.
It's true. Yeah, it's true, Anna. I think being able to take that step back and view how you're thinking and feeling in a situation, and being able to assess it's the one thing that kind of separates us as humans from the other animals, is being able to actually, you know, perceive our own existence, and so it's being able to develop those tools through, you know, meditation or any other kind of mindfulness techniques, like you say, that can be sport or art or those kind of things. I think makes such a big difference. Any other advice you'd give to somebody who maybe is listening to this and thinking, a bit like you did when you were on that course, some of these things resonate with me? What would you suggest to anyone in that position?
So I think there is a lot more information out there now that you can go to, and I tend to refer people to Mind. Their website has a lot of information, or Rethink Mental Illness. Somewhere like that, if you're trying to figure out, is this explaining my experience? And they also have tips and advice on there. I would absolutely recommend talking to someone if you can, or finding a way to try and process what's going on for you. And I think finding something, like we've been saying about the kind of mindfulness or the exercise, there is a reason that these things keep coming up as suggestions, the exercise, the mindfulness, because they do actually help. But it's not a one size fits all thing. So some people love running and it helps. I'm not a runner. That's not for me. So trying different things, not just trying one thing once and then going, oh, well, that didn't help. It's like a trial and error approach to find the thing that works for you. And it might be running or a seated meditation type thing. It might look different. So just kind of trying. And I think the biggest thing is knowing that it's not just you. You're not alone. And I think there's still a lot of shame around mental illness. There's nothing that's like inherently wrong with you. It's just something that can happen in the same way a physical part of your body can have issues at times. And I think that can really help to kind of separate from that feeling of shame, that actually there are other people who kind of get it or who've been through it, and that it's kind of okay. It's quite normal actually to go through it. And I think that's a really powerful reminder, because when you're in it, you just kind of feel so alone sometimes, and that no one knows what you're going through or understands, and how am I going to get out of it? So yeah, just remember that actually that's just your mind telling you that, and really other people have been through it and you're not alone, and that there is help and support out there. So.
Yeah, I think it's great advice. I think definitely go and speak to somebody. Just find somebody to speak to, and don't be ashamed, because I think pretty much everybody will go through some kind of episode of some description in their life. I think it's impossible not to. There's so many external pressures, there's so many internal pressures, that at some point you're not going to feel great either about yourself or about the situation that you're in, and it's important to find somebody to talk to. And it, you know, we laugh about our mother saying everything will be okay. It will. You just might not want to hear that as the first thing that you hear, but it's good to know that you can come through, and but you do need to speak to people.
And you might find that when you reach out to someone and say, this is how I'm feeling, that they're feeling something similar, or that they can relate to it. I think part of depression, we almost become really like self-centered, because it's just you in your own little world. And actually when you reach out, you might be surprised who has been through something similar.
That's great. Been really good to talk to you. And you mentioned your podcast earlier. If you let everybody know where they can find you if they want to hear a bit more, that would be great.
Yes. Yeah, so my podcast is on iTunes and Spotify, and it's called the Psykhe Mental Wellbeing Podcast, and it's Psyche with a K rather than a C, just because I'm awkward. And it's the Greek goddess of like the soul and the spirit, and it's the root of the word psychology, and I quite liked that, and everything is symbolized. So it's on iTunes and Spotify, and we dive into mental wellbeing generally, but we also do episodes on specific mental illness experiences that people have gone through. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we'll make sure there's links to your podcast when this goes live. And thank you very much for giving up your time to come and speak to us. It's been really interesting, and hopefully we'll speak again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're welcome, Hannah.
I was knocked down, heard the countdown through the haze, in the face of defeat, yeah. I was ruled out with no bailout, on my own, all alone, left to bleed out. But I rose up from the ground, just like